It's like nearly standing room only. This is great. There's some seats in the front here. So, thank you for being here on a hot day. Luckily, it's not quite as hot as it's been the last week or so. So, my name is Edith de Guzman. I am co-curator of the show that we are kind of gathering here around. The other curator is my husband, who is wearing an I hope people show up hat. So you'll be able to tell. And let me tell you a little bit about the show, and then we're going to be hearing from this esteemed panel behind me. So we have the opportunity through a partnership that we have with Avenue 50 Studio here to use their space. And we were invited by Kathy Gallegos to explore the theme of water. And we were given the space and invited to do sort of an installation, and we thought, that's not so fun. We have all these artists in our lives. It would be way more fun if we get them to be part of it. And so each of the 16 artists that is part of this show was given a panel, a wood panel with a spigot on it. And each of the artists was asked to pick one of 5 prompts to respond to. And you'll see that there are 5 themes that you'll get to explore if you haven't already seen the show. And these 5 themes are themes that affect communities in Los Angeles and Southern California. And they range from affordability to what do we do as the climate changes and water security becomes threatened. And I'm really pleased with what came out of this show. We have such talented artists. In fact, if you're an artist in the show, would you please stand up? We have a couple others who are lingering around, and some who are not here because we're in vacation season, but so it goes. So that's a little bit about the show. I will start by just acknowledging that we are on traditional, ancestral, and unceded territory of the Tonga and Gabrielino peoples, and we pay our respects to them, not only as the traditional caretakers of this land, but as present and emerging leaders and partners whose knowledge and connection to this land can help us collectively navigate some of the greatest environmental challenges of our day, including water security. And I also want to say a few words just thanking not only Avenue 50 Studio for providing the space, but also the California Institute for Water Resources, which provided us with a grant for materials, and Accelerate Resilience LA, and Arroyo Arts Collective, who's helping with the delicious food that we have. We also have the Luskin Center for Innovation and the UCLA Water Resources Group that is part of this, and the UC Agriculture and Natural Resources Division. We will be moving this show once it's done here August 10th. We will be moving it and opening at El Pueblo, Olvera Street, in a really beautiful space there as well. So we hope that if you'd like to come back again, or if you want to tell your friends and you're not available because they're traveling the world, over 40 days or whatever the saying is, they'll be able to come back and see it again, and that's thanks to a partnership with the U.S. Forest Service and the LA Center for Urban Natural Resources Sustainability. All right, thank you everyone for staring at my back all this time and not throwing anything at me. So at this point, I'd like to introduce our moderator, who will then introduce our speakers. This is Dr. Gregory Pierce, whom I have the pleasure to work with very closely. He is the Director of Research and the Co-Director of the Luskin Center for Innovation. He also directs the UCLA Water Resources Group and the Human Right to Water Solutions Lab. He has many other distinguished titles, but that will probably be enough for now. And thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Edith. And thanks to everyone for joining. I'm going to try to talk as little as possible. Again, I'm Gregory Pierce, UCLA. Various titles will spare you from reading. Again, I want to briefly introduce, or just go down the line, And I guess I'll ask everyone to say their name and organization. I'll give a little bit more introduction as we ask questions of the panel. But let's first, before I say a little bit more in the discussion, I'll just pass the mic when you introduce yourself.
Hello, Candace Russell, Friends of the LA River.
Sylvia Gonzalez, Co-Director of Research at the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Institute.
Hi, I'm Dr. Monica Sanchez. I'm a councilwoman in the city of Pico Rivera, also alumna of the UCLA Alumni Association, board member as well.
I'm Victor Griego. I'm the president and founder of Water Education for Latino Leaders.
Hi, my name is Alicia Montgomery, and I'm an assistant professor at UCLA's Institute of Environment and Sustainability.
All right, excellent. Again, we'll spend most of the time hearing from the panel and hopefully from you all. Just to frame the discussion a little bit, the title of the exhibition is From Source to Spigot. And if you walk around the room out there, you'll get a sense of the brief things I'm about to say. I just want to sort of frame up that water in Los Angeles, first of all, is quite controversial, a contested history, to be polite about it, and also somewhat artificial. Hopefully, well, I would say increasingly becoming less so. But the water that we have, we've gotten from many different places to sustain the population and all the consumption that we have in a way that's quite unnatural. That also speaks to the complexity of water in LA, just in terms of where we get water from. Of course, we get a little bit of water from the LA River, but most of the water that we consume either comes from underground or it comes from 3 different sources, hundreds of miles away. The Colorado River, up the spine of California, as well as if you're in LA City, which we are now, from the Ellis Valley. And then we're sort of producing or trying to invest in new types of water, or old types of water, but recycled water, turning wastewater into drinking water, potentially desalination, as well as going back sort of to old ways of doing, capturing more stormwater and saving it for later locally. Then the final thing I want to mention is, even though, if you watch Chinatown or if you read the LA Times, you're going to think LA water is LADWP, which is the largest water and power utility, public water and power utility in the country, and Metropolitan Water District, which is probably the most influential water agency in the United States, if not the world. But we also have a lot of fragmentation. We have a lot of inequalities in water access. We have 200 different drinking water systems across the county serving individuals, anything from literally dozens of mobile home parks serving 25 people that get treated pretty much the same way as LADWP does. And I know a number, if not all, of our panelists will sort of speak to the inequalities people are experiencing today in terms of drinking water quality, affordability, accessibility, that you can also, if you're out in that room, learn more about in the exhibit. But with that, I probably already said more than I intended to, so I want to turn it over to the panel and start with Candace Dickens Russell. Candace is a native of the lower LA River and a leader in sustainability, equity, and education across the state of California. As a leader in equity and environmental justice, Candace has guided several organizations in their equitable strategic planning. Currently, the president and CEO of Friends of the LA River. And the question I want to ask Candace, it's actually a 3-part question, but how has LA residents' relationship with the LA River changed over time? What is FOLAR doing in terms of the role and the evolving role of the river in LA? And then how can we and how are you sort of learning from tribal traditional ecological knowledge and restoration efforts in the broader vision for the LA River?
Thank you. I'm very excited to talk about this, and thanks for letting me hang out with you all today. So the LA River is now something that people actually know about. I think that many years ago, when Lewis was starting FOLAR, and when a lot of us were volunteers, had been volunteering for organizations since about 2009, there was still that kind of feeling of like, what is this? It's like just a channel. This is the flood channel, or in some cases people thought it was the sewer channel, goodness. So this knowledge and the awareness was really the main thing that FOLAR wanted to bring to the people of Los Angeles, and I feel like that has happened in many ways. So this idea that most people, or a lot of people, or I'll say more people know that the LA River is a real river is happening, and we're really happy about that. And it might have something to do with the thousands and thousands of school children we educate on the banks of the river every single year. Maybe not. But I do say that is really an important thing that we do. One of the number one things we do is education. And those thousands and thousands of children that we bring to the river every year often have never been to the river before. We had a little boy tell us just 2 weeks ago, this is, my dad lived here, my grandmother lived here, and I'm the first one in my family to ever actually come to the river. We see the river, but I'm the first one to ever come to the river. And he was quite proud of that, which made me happy, and made our CEO who heard the story and reported the story happy. So this awareness that the river is a river is kind of increasing, which we're really happy about. And I say this all the time, so forgive me if you've heard this before, but it never leaves my consciousness that the students we're working with today, our high school students, are voting in the next election. So the work that we're doing means something. Having them understand the implications of the river, the role of the river in the region is critical, that understanding. And they may not remember everything we said on that field trip, but they'll remember that they spent time at the river, and hopefully they'll be thinking in terms of advocacy and protection. So I do think that awareness around the river is increasing. I like to think so, but I'm an eternal optimist. In addition to that, I think that our role in that has been that education and that advocacy role. It is really hard to work on the river. Not because it's not pretty, not because we don't love it, we do. It's very beautiful, we do love it. But the LA River is municipal, it's county, it's federal with the Army Corps of Engineers. The number of stakeholders and people who have some sort of interest in the river is enormous, and it's very difficult. I will not say impossible, I will never say impossible. It is very difficult to get anything done. And so I think that our role is to play that role of bringing people together, convener, and to just really try to help people see one another's parts and pieces of the river together, and parts and pieces of how these things can work together. Be that voice of, well, what if we tried this? And I have found myself standing in a circle in a park, surrounded by engineers, asking me, what do you think we're gonna do? What do you think we should do? And I'm going, really? Okay. I'm going to call a meeting, and we're all gonna sit down together, we're gonna figure this out. Because, you know, when the bulldozers go into the river, they don't call the Army Corps of Engineers, they call me. And they wanna know what's going on, why is this happening? And so being in the role of kind of bringing people together and understanding how the pieces fit together is something I'm really proud of. And finally, in terms of Indigenous knowledge, we are really, we're interested in working with Indigenous cultures, with Indigenous people. We work with Sacred Places Institute, several other folks. We are learning, we are listening, and we are learning. And we are definitely advocating for things like renaming areas along the river to have their Indigenous names. Things like making sure there are permits so that Indigenous groups can access the river in the ways that they traditionally want to. There is a lot of discussion about different types of boats and watercraft in the river, and why are some allowed and others aren't. We're interested in that, and we're looking to help advocate for the rights of groups to be able to use the river in traditional ways.
Thanks, Candace. Certainly those themes of education and advocacy will come up again in the panel. I'm guessing the discussion. Next, I'm going to ask Sylvia Gonzalez, Dr. Sylvia Gonzalez, to speak to us a little bit about her expertise. Sylvia is the Director of Climate, Environmental Justice, and Health Research at the UCLA Latino Policy and Politics Institute. She does a lot of different work, engaged work as a researcher and a consultant with government, with nonprofit, with community-based organizations on topics really spanning climate and environmental justice, health, and broader social advocacy. Sylvia also has worked and does work with the Center for Neighborhood Knowledge and Luskin Center for Innovation at UCLA. The question we wanted to ask Sylvia was about trust and trust in water, and essentially asked, what is the state of trust in water in LA? Why does it matter? And if it's a problem, what can we do about it?
So as I was reflecting on this question, I thought about, well, we're in a creative space, so I want to do something a little bit different. I want to tell you a story about my dad because I think it's a reflection of the story of millions of people here in Los Angeles and their relationship with water. So bear with me as I do that, and then I also have an ask for you. As I am telling this story, think about what his refrigerator looks like and what your refrigerator looks like at home. So are you ready? So my father, his name is Jaime. He is the kindest, the most generous person that I know. He's 69 years old. We just celebrated his birthday. He's retired. He's an immigrant from Mexico. He's single. Just putting that out there. He lives in the San Fernando Valley. He cares for my brother, who's disabled, and he lives exclusively off of Social Security. So he migrated to the U.S. from Mexico when he was 14 years old to work in the fields in the Central Valley, so a farm worker. Eventually made it to LA and worked in a factory. That's where he retired. And so when you visit my father, and so here's the ask that I have for you. When you visit my father, the first thing that he's going to ask you is, do you want something to drink? His home is incredibly hot, and so he will always ask you, do you want something to drink? He'll open his fridge, so think about that fridge. And he's going to offer you three things. A bottle of water, and I have one, we had dinner last night, I have it in my bag, I didn't finish it, but it's a bottle of water, a can of soda, or if he has extra money that month, he'll buy the Mexican bottled soda, and if you're Mexican, they're better. Or he'll offer you some sort of other sugary beverage. It could be like the cheap version of Gatorade, which is Powerade. It'll be Tampico. It'll be Sunny Delight, whatever, some fake orange juice, right? But it's his way of sharing that he cares for you. But I think for me, then it becomes a question. You have been living in the U.S. I've been able to observe that throughout the years, his trust in tap water has really deteriorated to the point where he does not drink his tap water, right? Now he spends his Social Security check on buying all of these alternatives, and that is what he has. And so now I want you to imagine one of the estimates that we came up with about, I think it was in 2019, Greg, is that 20% of households in Los Angeles metro area do not trust their tap water. And so that's over 1 million households that have a refrigerator like my dad's. And so I also think about the implications for my community, right? The Latino community, there's more than 6 million of us in LA Metro. And does that mean that 6 million people have refrigerators that look like my dad's? So I always tell my friends, so it's like, keeping up with the Kardashians, but it's like keeping up with Jaime. That refrigerator is really expensive to maintain because of all the stuff that he has to buy because he does not trust his tap water. And so going back to the question about why does it matter? Why should we be thinking about our tap water and whether we trust it or not? I think about the three big consequences. The first one is the economic burden. Like I said, my dad relies on his Social Security check, but now he has to pay for all of those alternatives because he doesn't trust his tap. There's also the health consequences, right? There's evidence that shows that it impacts our teeth if we're not drinking enough water, or we're using an alternative source such as sugary beverages. There's also the environmental consequences of both the consumption and the production of bottled water. And then the last question that you had, Greg, for me is around what can we do to improve it, because it is a problem. I do think that there is a need to have a shift in the way that we communicate about water and also who communicates about tap water in our community. So we often have relied on government agencies, on water agencies, on our annual reports to do that reporting, right, to the community. But we know from the research that we've done that trust in government is at an all-time low. It's going to get worse. It's an election year where there's going to be a lot of misinformation, so I think it's a perfect opportunity to think about how do we change the communication strategy around water, who gets funded to do that messaging. It should be our trusted community-based organizations, it should be our youth, it should be our promotoras de salud in our communities particularly. We've shown that model is very, very important and very successful, so why not shift that strategy? So those are the solutions.
Thanks, Sylvia. Next, we're gonna come back to Monica, but we're gonna go to Victor first. Victor is the founder and board president of Water Education for Latino Leaders, which was founded in 2012. WELL's mission, which I'm sure you'll talk more about, is to ensure that local Latino decision makers have a comprehensive understanding of water policy. And Victor also publishes the only Latino-owned and focused political newsletter mailed to 1.5 million voters during every California election cycle, which sounds relevant right now. And Victor, I basically want to ask you a little bit about WELL. First of all, you have an interesting story having founded WELL. Can you tell us a little bit about why you started WELL, what WELL is up to, and particularly how WELL both influences water in LA and is influenced by what's going on in LA?
Great. Thank you, Greg. Good afternoon. So the first question is how I started, or why I started WELL. I started the organization because of my daughter. I was fortunate enough to work with my father. My father, before he had a brain tumor and eventually committed suicide, I was able to work with him. And I always thought about that in my career as I got older. And I was privileged enough to retire at an early age, and I thought to myself, what was I going to do after I retired? What would I spend my time on? And thinking about my father, I said, well, I'll ask my daughter. My daughter was an environmental science major at the University of San Francisco, and I asked her, Leah, what are you going to do with this degree? And she says, Dad, water. Water is critical for California. I didn't know much about water, like most of us. But I spent about a year going around California talking to people that knew a lot about water. And I realized that Latinos were going to be in charge of California in the governmental levels, local, state, and the federal. And many of them did not know enough about water. And if they were going to be in charge of government, then they needed to know more about water. And so I thought, let's start an organization that can educate and train elected officials. And so so we started water education for Latino leaders. Now, a Latino leader for our organization is anyone who represents a Latino constituency. So in our organization, we have white farmers in the Central Valley. We have African American leaders from Compton and Fontana. We have Asian American leaders from Monterey Park and other parts of the state. So we consider anyone who represents a Latino constituency a Latino leader. And we've been around for 12 years now. And our work is to educate and to train around California water policy. But mostly it's to provide leadership. And you're going to hear from one of our leaders now about the work that she's doing in her community around water policy. So that's why I started the organization. In terms of what we're doing, I was sharing with Monica earlier that we just had a water legislative workshop in the city of Highland Park. And to the question of trust, they have a campaign at Valley County Water called Trust the Tap. Sounds great, right? So they're trying to let people know they should drink their tap water, right? Well, the interesting thing was they were passing out bottled water. So I went up to the general manager and one of the board members, I said, well, if you want us to trust the tap, why are you giving people here bottled water? So I think we've got to get serious about trusting the tap, because if our own public water agencies are passing out bottled water, how serious are we about trusting the tap? So I just thought I'd show that.
Thanks, Victor. Yeah, there's a lot of bottled water in public water agency buildings, so problematic. And next we want to go to Dr. Monica Sanchez, who, as Victor mentioned, is a WELL Fellow, but also has a number of other titles and roles. She's a member of the Pico Rivera City Council, which she joined in 2019. Before that, she was a planning commissioner and served 4 years on the Pico Rivera Parks and Recreation Commission. She also, as she mentioned, is a board member for the UCLA Alumni Association and has many other titles and roles. But Dr. Monica, wanted to ask you, particularly to sort of bring us down to the local level, and as a WELL Fellow, if you could speak a little bit to the water and water equity issues going on in Pico Rivera. How are you engaging in them, as well as what are you seeing in terms of solutions moving forward for your community?
Sure. I can share my experience, and Pico Rivera is not too far from here, although traffic does in LA take a while. We're about 10 miles southeast of LA County, primarily working class, 99% Latina community. And I was elected in 2019 as the only Latina, the only woman on the city council. And I realized part of my impetus for that was my children, similar to many people. But I have 2 sons, and my primary interest was park space and green space. And my sons play sports, and I have them in sports year-round. We didn't have a lot of clean park space. Our slides and things had graffiti on them. Our lights were a little dilapidated buildings. During that year, I found out an article came out in the Whittier Daily News, and LA Times as well, I believe, regarding water contaminants. And the contaminant particularly was PFAS. And I didn't know anything about this, and I was surprised to learn about this. And one thing that I realized of being a new council member was, I don't know about water. And the city of Pico Rivera, we are our own Pico Rivera water district. So the council members are a board member on the water district. We make decisions about the water rates, standards, all of this. And so I was newly elected to make these decisions that I really didn't have information. And so I was grateful to be recruited, so to speak, by one of my wise mentors here, Victor Griego. And they have a water education for Latino leaders untapped fellowship program where they recruit new council members like myself, school board members, water board members that we really had to be immersed with my water jokes in water. And one thing that was my particular concern was the water contaminants. And is it safe to drink water? We had to make the decision at that time, was the city going to shut down our wells? Was it too contaminated, we couldn't repair it? And if we wanted to keep them, how much was it going to cost us to repair? And so we made the decision to maintain our own water infrastructure, and we found we were successful in securing federal grants as well as local grants, partnering with agencies. We're fortunate to have a water replenishment district, a facility, recycling facility in our city, which I've learned and become better connected to resources, both local, state, and federal, as well as county. And I feel that being connected to well and learning about water, infrastructure, contaminants, all of these things has really become a resource to my community. And that's one of the areas that we talked about in, historically speaking, the Latino communities, working class communities. We just have a lack of knowledge sometimes and a lack of information. And sometimes corporations may come in and take advantage of the lack of knowledge and sell you the bottled water and tell you to drink Powerade and Gatorade because that's going to hydrate you, when that may not be the case, and that costs more money. So I was able to participate in well, and I think that's part of our solution is to find education, a means for education, as well as partnerships. Across and I learned that not only Pico Rivera has PFAS contaminants, but this is a problem across the county, the state, the nation, and the world. And so we've been connected to people across all over and been successful in receiving congressional funds to help update our infrastructure and pay for that. And grants are cumbersome, federal grants are cumbersome, so smaller municipalities and smaller agencies are not able to tackle those. So that's another area that I think we can find a solution in organizations such as the Water Replenishment District, WRD, other agencies, even UCLA can help, researchers who can help these people, help us to write grants and help us get funding to address these issues within our communities. I see that as one solution, and I've been able to successfully connect to all of these partners, and I think that's one solution is for us to have a diverse group group of partners, including, I love this topic today, we have people who are in art, in finance, in research, in all sectors in science. My background is not in science, I'm in education. My doctorate is in education. I had aspired to be a professor at a university. I taught Chicano studies at UCLA for a short period, and that was not my background to be a council member or in water. And I wouldn't consider myself a water expert, but I felt that being in the city council led me to learn to access resources. And well has been a really big resource for me. We call each other Wellos. And if I have any water question, any water need, we have that phone a friend network. We can call Victor, we can call any one of my cohort members, and so that is a big resource to have within our network.
Thanks, Monica. So last, but certainly not least, we have Dr. Alicia Montgomery here with us. Dr. Montgomery is also assistant professor in the Institute of Environment and Sustainability at UCLA. She's an ethnographer who studies the social and environmental justice concerns of low-income racialized communities. She's written a recent book called Greening the Black Urban Regime, the Culture and Commerce of Sustainability in Detroit. And the question we want to ask Alicia is, given you're in LA, you're originally from LA, but prior to returning to LA, you've done a lot of work in other places, including Detroit. If you could tell us a little bit about your perspective on environmental justice concerns here versus other places, and the commonalities and distinctions that you're observing that we need to be addressing.
Thanks so much for inviting me to be part of the panel, and I'm really pleased to be here this afternoon. I was born and raised in South Los Angeles, and the place that I'm doing research right now is South Los Angeles. I'm looking at mothers, Black and Latino mothers in South Los Angeles, looking at their access to water, sanitation, and hygiene. And often that literature is focused in the global south. So mothers who are struggling to find the burdens that they have of finding access to water during times of drought, during times of forced migration, war, and so forth. But mothers with housing insecurity or who are badly housed here in Los Angeles also have challenges. And to go to the question that you asked me, Greg, well, that's true also in Detroit. Detroit is different in terms of it's severely depopulated, demographics are different, but the issues around housing security are present there and present here. And housing security is a requirement for water security. Okay? Housing justice is water justice contributes to lots of other types of justice that people need. I'm an ethnographer, so I go and I try to get the stories of people about what their struggles are. Our policy here in Los Angeles, when we're trying to get people to have water security or security during times of heat. And by the way, heat kills more people nationwide each year than any other type of natural disaster. But it often happens quiet. So, and it happens to people, because you don't see buildings, wiped out or anything like that, to the very old and the very young. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk to mothers is that mothers are often the ones who take care of the most vulnerable folks, the very young and the very old. And I wanted to know, well, what were they seeing, and then what were the burdens that were on them for attempting to provide this care, given that they might be badly housed and insecurely housed. So I want to talk just briefly, because I know we only have a little bit of time, about just two mothers. Beatrice, who is a Latina mother who immigrated from southern Mexico. She makes a distinction between beautiful heat and unbearable kind of heat that she experiences in was this this town that was triple digits in the summertime in terms of the heat. She described it as beautiful. She said it was warm water, warm rain. In evening time, her mother would make fruit beverages, and they would gather around something with food, and it would be next to a river, and so it was a beautiful, even though it was triple digit. Now, Los Angeles isn't necessarily hotter. The kinds of housing situation that she's facing here stresses her out. She talks about that she's afraid to pull off her little boy in the bathtub because there's mold in the bathroom. And so she doesn't want him to breathe in, so she tries to reduce the amount of time she exposes him to that. She also attempts, she wanted to have it like a little pool of water on the outside. The landlord puts locks on the outside water faucet and doesn't want them to have any kind of play equipment on the outside, so he thinks that it looks tacky or whatever. So, and then the place in which she's living, she does have air conditioning, but there are cracks in the wall, and so the cool air escapes. And she doesn't trust the drinking water. None of the mothers in my city trust the drinking water. So she spends money on and effort lugging these bottles of water. When I was growing up, my mother didn't trust the drinking water either. And I want to make it's not to say that they're wrong about that the water is bad. So I want to make a distinction between premise. I don't know if all so that there's water that comes from community water systems, and then the person who owns the property, there's premise plumbing, so that there's like the pipes that come from the if there's aging plumbing and the landlord's taking really good care of it, then there might be some discoloration and some problems with the water. And so some of the mothers, it might just be in their head that there's a problem with the water, but some of them it might actually be, they say that that water has a smell or whatever. So she doesn't trust the water. So that was unbearable heat because she wasn't able to be in a relation with water, and water is a strategy for dealing with the heat. Some of you, I say, you have water here, that's a strategy for dealing with the heat. Even more severe is a woman like Essence who is not housed, who is unhoused because African American woman, she has a little 5-year-old child, and she's also has a little dog that she's driving around in her car. Women and mothers with children tend to be not as visible as men who are unhoused. Men are more likely to be living on the street, where women might be vehicular unhoused or they're doing couch surfing and so forth. And so she really has to struggle and strategize to try to get water and a place for her child to bathe and cool off. So that's unbearable heat. But perhaps we can think, and because I'm assuming that there are artists in the room and people who are creative, of ways of thinking about our connections to each other, thinking about our connections to the watershed that we're part of. A community organizer in Detroit told me, about all the other identities that we have, we don't think about our connection to the watershed in which we live, to which plants and animals are part of, and that provides them with life. And perhaps if part of our identity was, I'm part of this watershed. Like she says, I'm part of the watershed of Detroit, and that goes beyond the city of Detroit and all of the animals and plants. Perhaps if we thought about that, and how do we preserve our connection to water, and how do we consider all of the people that are part of that watershed as deserving of water and sanitation and hygiene, perhaps we would have not only be able to preserve their life, people don't die during heat waves, but we would have a more joyful kind of
Thanks, Lisa. That's a great way, I think, to end the comments from the panelists. I want to thank all of the panelists. I think we do have time for 2 to 3 questions from the audience. Is that So I'm going to go ahead and open the floor. We do have some mics we can pass around. Does anyone have a question they want to ask? And I guess when you ask the question, be clear if you can, who you'd like to respond. All right.
This is for Candace. I was very curious, where do you take the high schoolers? I know the LA River is long, and in some areas it's, like you said, it's just beautiful, and some areas maybe more concrete and industrial. So do you show them both? Do you show them one? How do you work that?
So currently, our field trips are all housed at Lewis McAdams Riverfront Park, which is in the Atwater Village area, the Glendale areas. So that's one of the soft. So for all of us, just a little river education, there are 3 soft bottom parts of the LA River: the Sepulveda Basin, the Glendale Narrows, and Long Beach, the estuary, the Willow area. So that's one of the places that we currently have our students is at Lewis McAdams Riverfront Park, which is a soft bottom. We call those soft bottom areas of the river. We are expanding our education programs slowly, thoughtfully, sustainably. Our education programs to include some of those other places. So that's what we currently do that.
Thank you very much for the panel. It was really interesting and enlightening. I become very disillusioned by large institutions delivering change, whether that's governmental or party or companies or just large abstract institutions. And I just don't really know at this point, is that the only mechanism we have for delivering the type of change we need? And if it is there something we need to do about restoring trust or working with communities to restore trust in those institutions?
Who wants to talk about it?
Well, I'll take a stab. I hear you and agree a lot of what you just said, but the flip is also a problem. There was a small public water system in South LA called Sativa Water, very small, had an elected board, and it didn't do what people needed to do. So it's not just the big guys, it's also the small guys. It's really about humanity. How do we do the right thing as people? I just had a friend yesterday share how he got scammed by this bank, right? It wasn't a bank, it was some guy sitting in the garage scamming people on money. So your point is well taken in terms of government and big business, but it really comes down to humanity. And I do want to just make a comment. We recognize the land that we're on, and Greg, you talked about the water coming from 100 miles away, and I was thinking about that when I heard about the land, that we recognize the land that we're in, but really we should recognize that we're taking water from other places. We're literally taking water from people in the Owens Valley. We're taking water from people in Northern California. We're taking their water. Now, we buy food from all over the place, and we buy goods, etc. But in this case, we're literally taking water. And so I was thinking, we should probably go to the Owens Valley and have a party and thank them, or recognize them, or go up to the Sacramento community and thank them, because without that water, we wouldn't survive. We would not survive.
I can say a little bit of that as well. Being one of the newest council members and the only woman, that's part of why I ran. I felt some distrust and that decisions were being made that weren't to the best interests of children or mothers or people that had school-age children. And but now I find myself on the other end where people perceive me as being the government. And so I have to also ask myself that question: how can we be transparent and share information? And one of those decisions that I had to make was we had to make a decision to increase our water rates in incremental amounts because it hadn't been done in decades. And part of the result of that was we weren't able to fix our infrastructure. And we weren't able to get rid of the contaminants because of that. And so we were faced with the decision: do we shut down our water and purchase it from somewhere else? Or do we have incremental rates and find other ways in which we can address our infrastructure and other problems? And I feel that part of the solution could be to run yourselves if you have an interest or expertise in the water boards. We have another water board in our city, Pico Water Board, very small, and there were nobody running, there was no competition. It was the individuals that got in, just get in regularly, and maybe they just don't have information, they're interested in a title. I'm not saying all of them, but I want to encourage any of you, if you have an interest, look up your local water district and consider running for a water district or school board even, city council even. I think having people like ourselves and genuinely come in with an education and an effort and an initiative. But also reaching out to people, it is hard. Who can you trust sometimes? Even in my role right now, there have been agencies or people that I thought were good, that I trusted, and then you get double crossed, so to speak. And so it's really hard to determine that. But I think the strategy is to get involved ourselves. And I feel sometimes the first person to be the loudest and complain the loudest is the last to come up with a solution. And then when there is a solution, you're asking for volunteers, that person is the last to volunteer. So I think just being here, being educated and caring, I think we need more people like all of you, like all of us, to be involved in governance and water and infrastructure and local government, and even in business and corporations, people who have genuine care for their community and for children and elderly and adults. I hope and I pray for more people to be involved in our local governments. And I understand why. It's very difficult. Me as a mom, I'm rushing all around town. And we have a lot of duties, but I think, I have hope. I think the best solution is to get involved, get educated, find out who are your local water board, who are your local officials, ask them those hard questions. And if you don't understand the brochure, even my own city, I got it myself, and I have to ask our public works director and our water director, what does this mean? Translate this to me. Can we translate this to basic terms for us? Because I am not a scientist. Although I have my doctorate degree, I'm not that smart in science. So I know that's a long way to answer, but I think that's the best that we can do right now.
That's great. And yeah, a lot of local water board elections are going to be on the ballot this fall because it's going to be clustered with the presidential election. So don't skip that part.
Very important.
Yeah. I think we have time for one final question. Does anyone have a burning question? Okay.
Recently in the LA Times, there was an article centering around near Clovis or Fresno area, and this worker saw a pipe that was surrounded with like a little gate, and it kind of like was like a red flag, so he approached it, and it was running, or it was turned off, I don't know. And so it turns out that the president of the water district there in that county was turning on the water to give it to the farmers without the constituents and people knowing. And so it's not at trial yet, so can you elaborate about that? Do you know?
I'm not familiar with the case, but that's a very common story that we hear in places like mobile home parks, where if you don't pay your rent on time, the landlord will come and like shut your water down, will tell you. So I think it also applies not only to like businesses, but also in our small communities where you have someone who has that control and isn't transparent and uses it right to the benefit of some and the detriment of others.
Yeah, I mean, I can just add, I don't know about a particular case, but just since we're all in LA, I mean, 80% of the water in the state is used by agriculture still. Of course, agricultural grows our food. Central Valley is a breadbasket of the state. But in a lot of ways, our water accessibility challenges, particularly for farm workers in the Central Valley, are at the cost of water, especially cheap water, sometimes still free water for agriculture. And I know there's a lot of movement there, a lot of progression, there's conservation in agriculture, but there's still a lot more to do to prioritize water for people over water for business, even water for local food in some cases where it's necessary. And as Sylvia said, there's case after case of where there's a lot of water being used for local agriculture. It's not just the Central Valley, certainly the Imperial Valley, down by San Diego, the Coachella Valley, east of Riverside. There's a bunch of water being used, a bunch of water locally used for business, but people literally don't have access to sufficient, safe, and affordable water, and that has to be fixed. The state's working on fixing it, but there's a lot of structural inequalities there, and legal precedent is still on the side of sort of those inequalities. Anyone else want to add anything?
There's for those of, so it's all about corruption, that's what it is.
Yeah.
There was corruption, they're taking water that they shouldn't have taken, there's no oversight, and this individual probably ended up serving time in prison. But there's a good book called Dreamland. It's about the Central Valley. It's about Dreamland, L-A-N-D, by author named Mark Arax, A-R-A-X, a former LA Times reporter. But it tells the story of Central Valley water challenges. And, many of us know how many school districts there are. Like there's K to 12, and there's high school districts, community colleges. There's hundreds and hundreds of school districts. There are more water districts. How many, Greg? 6,000 or so? 7,000?
7,000.
There are 7,000 water districts in California. 7,000. And many of them are just controlled by a few people, and mostly farmers. And yet there's farm workers in those districts, and they don't get service because the purpose of that district is to be an irrigation district, to irrigate the land, the crops. And so the workers or the people who live there aren't being serviced by these districts. But it's a very complex. So the fact that Edith put this together is really a beginning to learn about this important issue, because it's very, very complicated. Many of these folks here have spent many years on the issue, and I bet you they would say they still have a lot to learn. Question?
We also need to be very aware that we're not really talking about small farmers. We're talking about corporate farming. We're talking about halo tangerines. We're talking about pomegranate and almonds, and fighting those corporations which have been deemed to be people is very hard.
Thank you. Thank you for that clarification.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think with that, I want to close up the panel discussion. I think all of our panelists will be able to stick around at least for a few minutes to further talk. I, of course, encourage you all to stick around and check out the exhibit, take the blind taste test of water. And yeah, thank you for coming. But I want to hand it back to Edith to close us out.
Well, can we get a round of applause for this? From the Council for Watershed Health. Still around from the Westwood Greenway. We have folks from Stantec here. We've got, there's Jonathan. And others of you that probably are engaged in this work in one way or another. So I really encourage you all to stick around, chat with each other, find some of the artists that are here. We are in fact going to have a blind water tasting if you haven't already participated in that. We have 3 brands of water, Arrowhead, Dasani, and Evian, against LADWP tap. You will not know which one is which. You will be able to distinguish, maybe what the flavor is, how it tastes different, how the texture is different. And then you'll find out which is which after you decide which your favorite is. If you haven't already done that, we encourage you to do that. We'll do kind of a facilitated one in just a few minutes once we get set up. And we also have popsicles that you can grab on the way out as a urban cooling mechanism that you can use, a strategy. And I would like to thank our panelists by giving them a book called The State of Water. It is a book that combines both water and art in a really beautiful way, and it's all about California, and it's an artist called Obi Kaufman. If you're not familiar with him, I highly encourage you to check him out. Thank you very much for being here. Enjoy the rest of the afternoon.